submitting your questions for this brother and for their careful consideration. And as I always like to say, you need to study for yourself. So Acts 17 and 11. Search the scriptures for yourself to see whether or not these things are so. So I'm sure these brethren will want you to do the same thing. So I'm just going to read the question. One of them had a question, then they had a parenthetical statement. But due to time, I'll just read the question for the panel. First question is, what does a person who is in an abusive relationship that is married, whether the abuse is emotional or mental or physical, what are their options as a child of God? You want me to read the question again?
I found out 5 minutes ago I was on this panel. They tell me that's why I get the hard questions. Part of me would like to avoid the question altogether, but obviously I'm not going to. I'll do the best I can with it. There is absolutely no excuse whatsoever for spousal abuse of any kind, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, whether it's verbal. Years ago, when I lived in Cambridge, preaching there, I was part of a I don't know what you call it, a committee or a commission or something there in Guernsey County, investigating abuse of this type. And I came across a statistic I thought was rather interesting. According to the studies that were done at that time anyway, and I don't know how it's changed, that's been 20 years plus. At that time, they said that physical abuse, 85% of the time, it was the man abusing the woman. Physical abuse of a man in a marriage or any kind of a relationship is relatively rare in comparison to the other way around. I have no statistics to back this up. It's my own personal observation, and it is, and that if you're dealing with psychological or verbal abuse, I guess it gets more 50-50. I've seen some women who are pretty unkind to their husbands. Now, the question is, what does a Christian who is involved in an abusive relationship, whether it's physical, emotional, verbal, what's their options? I don't know that there is a good one. Sometimes I think you just choose the least bad one, if that's a way of saying it. I don't believe God ever intended a woman to stand around and be a punching bag unnecessarily. I do believe that she has the right, and incidentally, guys, I just got to make this point. I'm not going to feel good about myself when I'm done. Guys, there is absolutely never any excuse for a man to hit a woman. It's out of the question. I was not very young when my mother taught me, boys don't hit girls. That is not a proof of manhood. It's a proof of weaknesses, and it's sinful. That is hardly showing honor to the weaker vessel. And if you have to hit a woman to prove your manhood, you got a bigger problem. Now, having got that off my chest. Personally, my recommendation would be if it is bad enough that she feels that she's unsafe, then she can leave. She does not, on that basis, have the right to file for divorce. She does not, on that basis, have the right to remarry, and that does not initiate what's been called the waiting game. Is it unfair? Yeah, he put her in a very bad, unfair situation. And my heart melts for her. It really does. Or him if the case is reversed. But my answer to the question is, you don't have to stay there and take it, but it is not a grounds for remarrying. Okay?
Appreciate that, Phil. And these men have more years of wisdom than I do. And I think the only other thing that I would add to what my hearing hasn't gone yet.
He's older than we are.
I think the other piece would be, while it's never the ideal But as Brother Phil pointed out, if you're in that circumstance and the mate is breaking the law, threatening you with a weapon, threatening bodily harm to you, and I think you have the right and you should exercise yourself to dialing the appropriate individual. In this particular case, if you're feeling threatened for your safety, the safety of your children, then Romans 13, you need to get yourself in a safe spot. You call the authorities and let the authorities deal with that man. Or if it is the wife and she's willing to skillet, and I say this, don't you take your Louisville Slugger. She's got a skillet. You don't get the Louisville Slugger. You need to, remove yourself from that situation. And if you say, look, and it could be that, maybe she's having some issues that she needs professional help, or he needs professional help. But the bottom line, as Brother Phil said and Brother Ben, you can't use that circumstance as a say, well, I'm going to divorce this person. Nope. It's regrettable that that situation would occur, but it could be that they need help, and over time, love, getting the treatment that he or she needs, you can then come back into that marital relationship and live in the grace of God if at all possible. So, Ben, or not.
Well, I just echo what these brethren have said. I do know of a case of a man who hid in the closet from his wife because she was bigger than he was, and this is my son and daughter-in-law. But she was threatening him. But I also heard of a case of a man that would come home drunk a lot, and he would beat his wife, and she just got tired of it. So when he came home drunk one time, having beaten her, he fell on the bed and she tied him up, and she took a broom handle to him and just wore him out. And the next morning he was so bruised and battered that he didn't do that. He didn't mistreat her anymore after that. But I'm not recommending that be done, but that's just what I've heard. But if one's life is in danger, or if one's children, if the children are in danger, then yes, and by all means, get out of that situation, or call the authorities and have that man arrested or whatever to get the help that he needs. But if one's life or one's children's lives are in danger, then get out. But it doesn't grant you the right to divorce or to seek another marriage.
Question is directed on just for Brother Ben Vic, because it was everything is coming from his lesson. So Brother Vic, you did deal with this, so I'll leave the question up here. But the question is, does the Bible teach that the guilty fornicator who was scripturally put away can remarry the person who put them away? And then does the Bible teach that the put away guilty fornicator can remarry after the one who puts them away dies?
Question one, does the Bible teach that the guilty fornicator who was scripturally put away, Matthew 19:9, can remarry the person who put them away? Well, if the person who put the guilty party away has not remarried and chooses to remarry that person, I believe that they could do that, because go back to the beginning. It is God's desire that it be one man, one woman for a lifetime. And I have, in one case, over many years of preaching, a couple separated. I don't know if they were, either one was a guilty party, but they they separated and divorced, and they wanted to remarry, and I performed the ceremony. But I believe it's God's will that it be one man, one woman for a lifetime, and if the one who does the putting away can forgive, then yes, and I would encourage that. In fact, even when there's been fornication committed, if the innocent party can forgive and the person has repented, then I would encourage the couple to stay together. 2, does the Bible teach that the put away guilty fornicator can remarry after the one who put them away dies? I believe so. And I use Romans 7, 2 and 3. Some hold to the view that the guilty party can never remarry. I don't believe that. Going back to question 1, Matthew 19:9, whosoever put away his wife except it be for fornication and marries another committeth adultery. But if they go back to each other, then I believe that's what God desires. And in Romans 7, Paul said, for the woman which hath an husband is bound by the law to her husband, so long as he liveth. But if the husband be dead, she is loosed from the law of her husband. I don't think she's any more bound to her husband after he dies, and therefore she would be, if she was the guilty party, she would have the right to remarry. But she would need to repent of having, committed fornication. And so I believe she could remarry if she marries someone who has a right to marry. Now, these brethren might want to speak and give their thoughts on it.
For Brother Greer and Brother Melson, how do we keep our youth from conforming to this wicked world? It appears we're losing our youth to the world at an alarming rate. How can we encourage them to be faithful to the Lord?
Appropriate question. And I don't know, I don't have a antidote other than to say, one, as Solomon said, we have to provide the instructions. Remember now your Creator in the days of their youth, Ecclesiastes 12. One of the speakers, may have been 2 of them, but I think I've heard it a couple of times in the lectureship already. One of the other things we have to do is provide the right example. As Paul says, be thou an example to the believer in word and deed. And so as older Christians have to set the tone and be the examples to the younger people so that they give them the right example to want to emulate. And they need to see in us, wow, that's what I want to be like. It's not, I want to be like Mike, I want to be like LeBron, I want to be like Aaron. I don't mean the priest Aaron, but it's, I want to be like brother and sister so-and-so. Man, look at brother and sister so-and-so. They are the kind of couple that I want to be like. And so now on the practical side, and then this is all the last where I'll end, I don't believe, and I know some might disagree with me on this one, maybe not. I don't believe it's the church's responsibility to be the center of entertainment. It is not the role of the church to provide all of these things for young people. That's the role of the family. God gave the family as the place where they are to learn all of these things. The family is to be the center of the entertainment. The family is to be, that's the piece. Now, can Christians get together and do some of these things? Absolutely, but it's not a congregation's job to do all of that stuff. And too many folk, if they want to, we get calls, and I'm pretty sure you probably get the same thing. What does your congregation offer young people? What are y'all doing for this group? And so we get these calls here, and people are trying to. One of the speakers said it, consumerism. So they're looking at the church from a consumer standpoint.
And you fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and the admonition of the Lord. Years ago, it's been a long time ago now, I'd love to see an update on these numbers. And I forget who it was that even conducted the study, but they had done a survey among churches of Christ. And they came across what I thought was a very interesting statistic. They found that when they surveyed Christian families, where those families were both father and mother in an intact two-parent family, where both mother and father were faithfully involved in the Lord's church. And I'm not just talking about going to church on Sunday morning. I'm talking about every time the doors are open, involved in gospel meetings, vacation Bible schools, all the activities of the congregation. In those cases, we held 93% of our young people. In those cases where parents were not actively involved, where occasional attenders maybe, we held 7%. And that one thing I thought was interesting was the survey showed that crossed congregation after congregation. It had nothing to do, it was not affected one bit by whether it was a large youth group with a professional youth minister or whether it was a small congregation with just one or two kids. It's the parents that have the real responsibility here. I think it's interesting. Paul said, fathers, bring up your children in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. He did not say churches bring up your children, because the fact of the matter is the church has no children. God did not give children to churches. He gave children to parents. And guys, I'm going to hit us right between the eyes with this one. I want you to notice he says, fathers bring up your children. He did not say mothers. The primary responsibility for the spiritual training of the children lies squarely on dad's shoulders, not mom's. And we will do a whole lot better bringing our kids up once we take that responsibility. Now, that's not to say that the mother doesn't have a primary responsibility. Was not mother and grandmother responsible for Timothy? I was raised by a single mother, primarily. My father was injured in World War II. By the time I was 9, he was in a veterans hospital where he stayed as a permanent resident until I was 16 when he died. I was raised by a single mother. And I thank God for her godliness. I wouldn't be here if it were not for her. I have 2 daughters, both of whom are faithful. They're married to faithful Christian men. And I give the credit to a large extent of that to their mother. My wife is probably one of those spiritually minded women I have ever encountered, and she did a tremendous job with our girls. But I got to believe I had a little part to play in that as well. The answer to the question, as far as I'm concerned, is what do we do? Live it. You don't just talk it, you live it. I've seen parents, they'll come to me and they'll say, I don't know what I did wrong. My kids, none of them were in the church, but I had them in church every time the doors were open. We never missed. We were always involved. Okay, that's all well and good, and you're not going to raise faithful kids if you don't get them to church on a regular basis. On the other hand, you're not going to raise faithful kids either if you're at church every Sunday and you go home for Sunday dinner and have fried elder and roast preacher. You cannot run the church down constantly in their presence. And you've got to live what they're hearing on Sunday. You've got to go home and live it Monday through Saturday. They got to see it. And really the example is where it comes from more than most of us, to be honest. There are times in our lives, did we not need mom or dad just sit down, put a finger in our face and explain some things? We need that from time to time. But that explanation carries a whole lot more weight if the child knows mom and dad are living what they're talking. So how do we help them? We don't just talk it, we live it.
Thank you, brother. This is second to the last question that we have. I like this question.
We're all agreed, right?
Right up my alley.
It's unanimous.
Because it's talking about one of my favorite TV shows. Okay, but questions on, can a Christian, male or female, work as an undercover detective for the government does undercover or spy work on behalf of well, it's the same thing, state or government, violate any principles of Scripture on, Brother Greer, honesty, since the worker would be pretending to be someone that they are not?
I'm going to observe the passive. Actually, I want Rico up here. He's the only one up here who ever worked for the federal government. I'm going to give the most honest answer I know to that. I don't know. I really don't. From my own personal perspective, I could not do it. I could not justify the dishonesty, the subterfuge, the lying that's involved in doing that. I personally could not do it. I don't see any way around it that you've got to lie. There's a lot of things that I honestly believe goes on in our government while I understand the need for it, I don't believe a Christian can participate. My personal perspective, these guys may disagree with me on that, that's fine. I personally I believe the Bible very clearly authorizes capital punishment. I believe Romans chapter 13 is as clear on that as it can be. I could not pull the switch. I couldn't do it. Now, is that inconsistent? Probably, but I got to live with my conscience. And as far as the question is concerned, I suppose that has to be done, but that doesn't mean a Christian has to be the one who does it.
Phil, I don't think you're inconsistent. I think, especially we listened to the lessons we heard, the Christian lives by a higher standard, by a higher ethic, and so there would probably be certain jobs that one might say, I cannot conscientiously do because of my standard as a child of God. And therefore, I'm not going to lie. I will tell the truth, so I can't take this job in the government, whether, and we're not, doesn't matter what agency it is, just not going to do it. If you study the doctrine of situational ethics, the situational ethicist says ethics are relative and therefore you can do it. That ethics, and so in order to be a good citizen of the country, you're being loyal, therefore your job requires you to do it, therefore it's okay. No. When you read Revelation chapter 21 and verse 8, it didn't say that those who lie for the government will be okay. And that says all liars. If, I don't care if you're in the NSA, CIA, ASA, who knows what, whatever, the question becomes, who are we going to be loyal to? Even if you're in the military and, your commander says you must tell a lie, Bible says that we're citizens of a greater army, that's the army of Christ. And we're going to stand before the Lord and give an account to him. And so what you're going to do, put me in jail? And I guess I'm going to go to Leavenworth. I'm going to go to the stockade because I'm not going to lie. But isn't that what happened to our brethren in Hebrews 13? They were told to deny the Lord. And they said, nope, we're not going to deny the Lord. If the best you can do is kill us, do your thing.
Yeah. And so I guess you guys would also say that a Christian cannot be an actor because they are pretending to be someone who they're not. So that would also be a conclusion that you can draw. And the military, that's a whole different realm altogether. And I'm not trying to justify lying, but your work, your job, Sometimes there are situations in the military where it's your life or it's their life. And sometimes, I'm not even called lying, just you have to use stealth. You have to use stealth. So you cannot fully disclose who you are. You're not lying, but you're not going to fully disclose who you are. If you allow someone to believe that you're someone who you're not, if it's to your advantage, then that's fine. But I understand. We'll move on. The last question. Based on written and personal testimony, okay, this is concerning Jeffrey Dahmer. We all remember who Jeffrey Dahmer was. Based on written and personal testimony of brethren, and I actually know the relative of the brother who converted Jeffrey Dahmer. Do we have enough evidence to suggest a genuine conversion of Dahmer, him turning away from sexual deviancy, murders, and cannibalism? Like I said, I personally know a relative of the person who lived in Minnesota and who studied with Jeffrey Dahmer, who became a brother. And this person said absolutely, based upon the information that he has, and we are not in any position to judge anyone's heart. So based upon evidence that they had, Jeffrey Dahmer converted to Christ. And so the evidence of his life, he only lived 6 months after his conversion before he was killed in prison. So based upon the evidence by Prentice Metter, he said, Brother Dahmer, Jeffrey Dahmer, was converted to Christ. But I'll leave that to the brother again. So based on written and personal testimony of brethren and others, do we have enough evidence to suggest a genuine conversion of Jeffrey Dahmer, him turning away from sexual deviancy, murder, and cannibalism?
Well, again, we have no reason not to believe the evidence or what has been said. I think he had correspondence with Garland Elkins, and I have no reason to doubt that he was not obedient to the gospel, not any more than anyone else who has obeyed the gospel, because we cannot read their hearts.
I think we're all in agreement with that. Brother, I think everyone up here has a great deal of respect for Brother Garland Elkins, and Brother Elkins, I believe, wrote a tract, and he commented before his death about the conversion of Jeffrey Dahmer becoming Brother Dahmer. So I think he was, based upon what we know, and glad that I'm thankful to God that those who were able to reach out to him, and that he was open-minded enough to study with someone. So anything else, brother? Okay. All right. So thank you, everyone, brethren, for your work. Everyone get a good night's rest. Tomorrow, Michael, you got this tomorrow morning. We have Bible class at 9:30. You have a song?